So let's talk about product development and road mapping. So a lot of our founders come to us saying we don't know where to start. We have this great idea and we don't know what to do with it. And this is what we're going to try to cover. So usually it starts in 4 phases. You have the ideation, the validation process, that's very important, the actual development part, and then the launch. And it's very important to prioritize and understand from the beginning what are the priorities and what are the key milestones to save money, time, and to manage expectations of all the stakeholders around the table. So let's start with ideation. So ideation is a part, obviously, where you encourage people and where you encourage yourself to get all the ideas out there. So what you want to do there, it's a lot of feedback, getting customer insight, testing some ideas with customers, maybe posting and seeing how people react to different things, and potentially doing more conventional market studies, market research, etc. You then select the viable ideas based on customer data, based on testing, A/B testing, and trying to understanding the potential resource impact, the potential timeline and resource impact. And you decide what is going to be the prototype that I'm going to build to get the right validation both from the market and from investors. So deciding on the prototype is really important. This is what's going to really end up being your pitch deck, your communication tool to the rest of the world. Your vision is where you see your product going for the near to midterm, mid-future. So it's about 3 to 5 years. Where do I imagine my product? And then you have to break it down into smaller achievable targets. So what would my prototype look like, which is, an idea and a concept, a design concept that I can share. And then what will my first version look like, and identifying very early on what is the roadmap of features that I want to launch, ideas that I'd like to develop as we go. You have to have this vision, but at the same time you have to be very flexible because things will definitely change. However, ideating from the beginning allows you to understand what are the shortcuts and the design decisions that you're going to take from day one. Then features prioritization and MVP development. So once you develop the key features based on customer feedback, you then have to use a prioritization technique. We usually use what we call MOSCO. What are the must have, should have, could have, won't have. And the won't have are as important as the should have and must have. Knowing from the beginning what the product will not be is very important to get alignment from the team saying, these are a lot of great ideas, but this is what we're focused on. This is where we're going to be good, and this is where we really want to build a competitive advantage, and we want to build the reputation of our product. It's very difficult to be good and to be the best at everything. So really, this prioritization is really quite important for you. The MVP is built to address the core problem of the target group, not the peripheral ones. So you want your core problem to be addressed, and a lot of people get really excited and there's small features here and there and they think of that and why don't we do that, etc. And they end up spending their time and money on small peripheral ideas instead of the core target. Then there's the customer feedback loop. We have a tendency to overlook the customer, and as basic as that might sound, you need to get validation from your customers, and you need that validation at every single touch point. From day one, from ideation, you want to involve them. Then whenever you have deployment, ideas, new features, prioritization mechanism, find ways to get your customer feedback and some customer insights. Obviously, you want to listen to the core, and you also want to watch out for anomalies. So if someone says something different, you might be intrigued by it. But the whole point is to prioritize based on mass and frequency. Communication with your team is going to be the biggest pain point as you develop all those ideas. Because again, if you don't have a clear vision and the roadmap is not set in a very detailed way moving forward, you're going to have a tough time making sure that people are connecting. Developing and creating a product is not a one-man job. It usually involves a lot of people, a lot of skill set, a lot of stakeholders to come in. So you really want to make sure that you talk and you communicate. And some tools are quite useful there. You often use Asana, Jira, Slack, etc., just to make sure that the communication is always stellar. And then to build the roadmap, the most important components are the strategic objective, but also the timeline, the milestone, and the key features. So really trying to combine all those elements of time, resource, skills, and product features, and trying to see what's the best combination of all of these. In terms of development methodologies, there are two very common development methodology. So the first is the agile development approach. Most of our founders are going to use it or are going to be using it because it's quite adapted for smaller structures and first-time founders or smaller startups. So basically it enhances flexibility. It allows you to plan ahead, but also be quite flexible as you go. It includes a lot of customer feedback. And the whole idea is to iterate and have sprints and scrums to take the best decision and the best prioritization mechanism as you go. The second is the waterfall development. This is really quite adapted for structures that are established, that know exactly what they want to do, that know 5 or 10 years ahead, or at least a year ahead, what are the different steps that are coming their way. Uncertainty and R&D are not necessarily as big of a part of their development. So this is more linear as a development, and this is very efficient for when you expect little to no change. Finally, once the MVP is ready, you need to prepare for the launch. And for that, we have different materials that you can also watch on the link below on how to have the best possible go-to-market and to make sure that you prepare the product and you prepare the whole needed toolkits and collaterals to make sure that the launch is as successful as possible. But what's really important for us to say today is first, think of what comes before the launch. So make sure that you have enough quality checks, make sure that you have tests on user experiences and you're sure that the product is as solid. And also make sure that you give enough time to post-launch. So it's not only about the tea time, it's about what comes before and what comes after. So making sure after the launch that you have iterations, that you have checks, that you have improvements as you go. The work does not end once the product is launched. So keep an eye on KPIs, make sure you look out for iterations, needed iteration, and leverage that insight again and again. So one thing we get a lot from founders is, okay, but when do I launch? Should I continue until I run out of resources? Should I actually just launch very early on and test the market and maybe drop the idea if it's not working? So what you want to do here is to make sure you have your first understanding of what the product's going to look like that's really well done. So people understand your capacity, your capabilities, they understand your vision, and usually people know when you get the first version of a product and it has something that's different, even if it's not fully developed, you would know that this is a company to watch for. So take the time to really think of what do I want, especially my first launch. What do I want my first launch to tick as boxes? So what do I want this first launch to achieve when a customer plays with it and spends some time on it? I want them to feel awe. I want them to feel relieved that somebody at last thought of this solution. I want them to say, oh, it looks better than what I currently has. Or I just want them to say it's fun. So what are the emotions and what are the targets that you want to get from anybody using your product? And at the same time, you need to think in terms of sustainability of your business. So what do I need to develop in terms of product and also of potential user generation or user acquisition, and in terms of potential monetization, to make sure that I get the next funding round. So always think of your different stakeholders, my customers, my users, what do I need to achieve for them, but also my investor and all the ecosystem around me, be it potential staff that might be attracted by this company, investor that might decide to put in some money. What do I need to have done and done perfectly for them to be on board? So it's up to you to find the balance between developing too much and potentially missing the first launch and missing this first step of internal validation, and at the same time launching too early and missing this element of interest and creating the interest and the hook that's going to keep the customer and the investors coming back for more. So today we're joined by Abdo Achkar. Thanks a lot for being here, Abdo. As I mentioned, you helped us many times, as I am, by supporting startup and doing some tech developments for them. And so my question for you to start is, if I were a founder today, where do I start? You know, everybody's a bit confused. Do I start prototyping directly? Is it about finding the people, finding the investors? Where do I start? How do I do it?
Usually I think about should I build before I build, okay? So should you build, I usually would put an ad for it and I would get market feedback to understand whether I should build the product or not. So let's assume like all this checks out and you want to build the product. Where do you start, okay? So I would recommend every founder to go and attend any prototyping crash course to understand how to draw things at least on paper so they can communicate better with a designer or a tech team, etc. So we call it the back of the canvas drawings. So this is a good thing for any founder to draw what they have as ideas. That's a very first place to start. It needs to be quick, like don't go prototyping for months. It should take, less than a week. Find the right designer for you to help you do the initial drawings at least.
And then how would I prioritize the features? How do I decide what are the few should have that must have and should have that should be on my initial MVP?
Yeah, so obviously everything comes from the clients. So the clients would tell you like, I need this, I need that. Make sure not to focus only on vocal clients. Some clients have deeper pains. So make sure that you prioritize by the biggest problem that you're trying to solve. And usually biggest but shortest to market. So you might have something that's very big, but
so
can take
a quick wins with high impact.
Exactly. Yeah, low hanging fruit with really high impact. That's the way I usually would start. First product that you build needs to be bringing enough value to retain these customers and scratch a really, really painful itch for them. If you're building something that's like okay, but not really a big pain for them, they're gonna avoid, or not necessarily avoid, your conversion would be much less. So how about you make it like really converting with a solid value proposition, so when you go and talk to them, it's much easier.
How do I prioritize the customers? Because again, there's a lot of noise and some of our founders sometimes have a tough time identifying what feedback is valuable and what isn't.
Yeah, sometimes you have a lot of customers. Some are customers that are not willing to pay. Some are customers that want to pay. Some customers want a lot of things. So what's important is to understand what you're trying to solve for. Initially, yes, it's a lot of noise. We're not going to know exactly what we want until we get the real product out in the hands of the people. You can prioritize, different people prioritize things differently. You can say, hey, many more people are asking for this feature, so it looks like this feature seems to be one that we want. So frequency is one of, it's a signal, okay? Another signal would be how much frustration a certain customer is talking about a specific point. And it could be one customer that's really, feels that pain point that the others are not expressing or not knowing how to express. But what you don't want to do is like, you don't want to solve what Febreze was trying to solve back in the day. They were trying to, cover a certain smell, right? And they found
specific.
It was a very specific one. They spent millions of dollars to cover the smell of cats because they found that very vocal customer. Okay, so you don't want to end up doing just that. So you want to figure out like, is it a real pain that can be scaled across many customers? Okay, so you validate, you iterate back and forth with the customers, prioritize based on frequency and pain level, and accordingly build the product, give it to them so that they can feel it in their hands and they can report back to you.
So how do you find the balance between not asking and being a very visionary leader and developer, and asking too much and maybe trying to cater for too much and too many features?
Yeah, so basically what you want to do is you want to ask as much as possible. So gather all the information. There's nothing wrong with gathering the information. So information gathering is different than decision making. So you gather all the information, and I'm sure Steve Jobs basically had all the information. Deciding how to move is a different question. So you gather all the information for you to understand their path, their needs, their feelings, okay? Once you do, then you can decide, hey, they're missing on this aspect, they're not understanding what they want. Then I can set the trend for them to move in a certain way. So collect all the feedback, determine the pain points, and sometimes like if you delay everything for a bit, let's say, you know, all the clients are asking for features, we wait for a week, and then they're gonna start asking for the ones that are causing them most hurt, then you'll know this one is the most important. But if clients keep asking and switching and asking and switching, you don't want to do this. So you want to listen to the feedback, but don't let them dictate the path of execution.
It's really a big management decision at the end of the day of, you know, getting the feedback. You said unlimited feedback, but maybe try to limit the time of the feedback before launch, or try to limit it in some way. Prioritize, see the ones that are most recurring, the most common, and prioritize in terms of what customer pool is the most important to you, right? So that would kind of summarize what you said, or did I miss something?
No, you added on it.
Perfect. Did I add something right?
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. Looking at different customer pools, this is something that's very important, which can also lead to segmentation of product costing. So hey, this is a pool that we discovered after we did this, and we noticed like, hey, this is a pool that we need to serve in a different way. Like, hey, this needs a higher tier. Or, you know what, like all the other pool doesn't make sense for us, let's pivot and focus on the higher pool. So you don't have to solve everybody's problems.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to solve the right problem for the right people. And if the market is not the market that's enough, grow your market, don't change your product. So if I have a solution that's really good, I should probably look into distributing it to more people, not necessarily in my pool or my market, versus like building everything for everybody in my market, especially for a small set of people that want a specific thing that's dedicated for them.
So fewer better things, like even if it's a tighter product or a smaller product, but be the best at it, have the best availability.
You have to be the best at what you're doing,
instead
of like doing like the whole spectrum of a product, which is not that good, etc., with all the exceptions. Especially with tech products, it becomes non-maintainable.
Yeah.
You increase your risk of failure over time. Your cost of maintaining it becomes
like... And your team goes nuts.
Your team grows... Well, the team goes nuts
anyway. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. But, well, that brings me to my team, because this seems like, you know, a lot of moving parts to have to manage at the same time. Mm-hmm. So how do you actually manage the team? How do you make sure that the collaboration happens well? Do you involve them in decision-making when deciding on features or specific strategic orientations? And how do you make sure that everybody knows what's happening within the company?
Okay. Cool. With us, basically, at SowLutions, we have the founders, like we're investing in with the founders. I'll take the founder's seat so we can explain like how it works for founders. So basically, the founder is coming from getting signals from the market. So the founder basically understands what they want in terms of intent and delivery. Okay, so they don't necessarily know what the product should look like, but they need to get the intent out. Okay, so my intent is to solve this problem. This is the biggest pain. So it's very important for the founder or salespeople being people going in the market to understand what the problems are and convey them properly to the team. So this is the first step. Second step, the team needs to understand that, okay, now it's time to coordinate between design, like product design, and software, okay? And the designer needs to sit with the software even early on to determine the real definition of problem, because a lot of times the designer designs something that is not coming from a data structure that's sound. And if it's not coming from the right data structure, it messes up the design, okay? So at this level, before building the wireframes, the designer and the tech team should sit together and understand the whole value proposition, the pain point, etc., etc. The designer goes on to draw a journey, experience, etc., but it's all coming guided by the problems that were provided by the founders, and the founder should be part of this journey creation, obviously. And whatever the tech team is proposing in terms of like, hey, this can be done, this can't be done. My philosophy is over design, under develop. Okay. So always design the whole thing. If you can like get the full picture out.
Preemptively understand the mechanism,
it doesn't have to be built, but just design it. Design everything you can. It's very easy, very cheap to design. Okay, it's very costly to develop. Okay, so design the whole thing, add all the ideas, add all the wireframes, get a product that's ready, looks good. Okay.
And
then
go deep.
select the parts that you want to build.
Yeah.
So you want to build this and this and this. Okay, كتير منيح, excellent. We'll move them out. We will build these. The rest will not be touched, and that's how you build the product. You have to prioritize. It has to be small enough with good enough core value. So instead of like building a car, you don't want to build a car without wheels, right? You want to build a really good bicycle. So that's a really common example in startups, right? So to build a really good bicycle, you need to determine what are the features that you're building. How do you simplify the product? This is what we want to build, but we really want to build it well. It's not like, hey, build it just fast. So prioritizing saves you your time, not building it fast. Okay, so and something like why go to market is so important is not just because I want to compete faster. It's because I want to get the feedback faster. And once people get their hands on the product, a lot of things will change.
Yeah.
So instead of like waiting for a year to build a product to get feedback from people after touching the product, when they'll see the designs, they'll be like, okay, nice, this is what I want. But once they play with it, they'll be like, no, this is not what I want. So establish a base clientele that basically can give you feedback honestly. You go back and forth with them. You're still the founder at that level. You're touching base with them, understanding their concerns more. So you need to build that base. Once you build the base, then you can accelerate as you see fit.
In the shoes of a founder, an early stage founder that just raised, like, let's say $500,000 or $1 million to develop, how would you split that? How much is development supposed to take if we're talking about a startup, a tech startup? I know it varies, but most importantly is in tech, how much would you account for a buffer for errors, for mistakes? Because what we see a lot is founders that have great ideas that are going to end on the shelf because they lack the last 100K to actually finish their development, because they overspent at the beginning and didn't account for a buffer. So how do you work around that, and what's kind of a golden rule in the industry?
Most non-technical founders, especially the first company they build, they're not gonna hit the right technical costing. Okay, so this is why prioritization is key. You know, if you go and build and spend 100, 200,000, then you're not giving yourself enough room, right? So you need to get a product that's viable before you start spending the money on other features. So you should not spend 3/4, like you should only spend 1/4 of what you have on validating. Like before it's valid, don't spend too much. Like you have to get a prototype out. You can use no-code platforms to validate a lot of the ideas. I'm not talking about super technical products. There are obviously some products that require R&D, that can take a long time, etc., etc. But the ones that we're talking about are usually, product-oriented companies that have customer feedback. Take the customer feedback, build a prototype, iterate, make them pay as early as possible, okay? The person who's paying for a year, once you have many of them, will get you probably your extra 100K that you're looking for. So it's a balance between business and technology. It's not like technology, we didn't have enough money for it.
We talked a lot about, very technical product development and the steps there. But let's say I'm a founder that has a great idea, but I don't know, I'm not a tech person. So is there solutions for that? How should I go about it? Should I outsource and never understand or never own the tech? Should I actually spend money on having the tech being done in-house? What would be your recommendation?
Okay, very interesting one. Most of the time, my best recommendation is to get a co-founder, a technical co-founder. So without a technical co-founder, as an investor, I'm not always inclined to touch these companies. Okay. An alternative to a technical co-founder is a good value prototyping agency, okay? But we're talking about the founder still having to learn some of the stuff, at least because if it's a product company and you're selling a product, you need to understand product. At least in the first year or so, like the founder needs to immerse themselves in product. You cannot go and sell.
And in all fairness, we've seen this a lot. So we have teachers, we have prior, consultants, etc., that ended up developing tech solutions or products. And now they understand the tech very well. They probably cannot code, but they at least understand how it works enough to give guidance, to prioritize, etc.
Yeah, so this is important. Now the question was if we think that they should bring a team in-house.
Yeah.
Bringing the wrong team is the worst thing you can do.
It's very costly.
well, not just costly, it's risky. You lose time, you lose money, and you don't get anything done. And a lot of times you have to rebuild it. A lot of the startups, not to say most of the startups, that don't have the right expertise end up building the product twice or thrice. A lot of startups go and hire, juniors that are getting started or their friends. It might work at the prototype phase, but if you're really building a good product, you want to think about technical debt. Technical debt is worse than debt, okay? Technical debt basically is with you, slows you down all over the period, costs you more. So we're not just paying more, we're delayed over time and more delayed. So if you're hiring someone, make sure to hire a person that can show you something they've done before.
Okay. Good.
So if they've done it before, then you can look at what they have. At least they faced some problems. Maybe they built three solutions in the past, then you can know that they faced the problems they would have otherwise faced with you. Generally, it doesn't have to be people in your own country. I'm a bigger fan of in-person. I like in-person because the communication is much more, it's much easier, collaboration is clearer in person, etc. But if you want to build a team, find really advanced people to help you with it. With development, it's different than builders. Like if you find a builder, somebody who's building a wall, you can find someone who's a times and a half faster than me, right? I'm a fast builder. With software, you can find somebody who's 50 times faster than me. So you want to find these people that are really good. If we're talking for Lebanon, it's going to be really hard. So you have to interview the person before they come, what they know about intellectual property. It's a question on our interview process. What they're developing is for the company, and they need to sign for it.
So any parting words for aspiring entrepreneur or new founders? What are the biggest mistakes you've done? What are the biggest learning? What are the things that you'd like them to know so that they don't replicate it and they don't go through the same hassle as you?
Okay, so when you're building a startup, try to find as many people that can work with you. Or you working with other people. It doesn't have to be I am the entrepreneur, I am the founder, I can build everything myself. So this is one of the biggest things that I've seen in our culture that needs to change if we want to build really good startups. The second thing is find people that are already in the market. You can find advisors, give them some equity, be generous with people that can grow the value of your pie. Okay, if you just hold on to the whole thing and just try and figure it out yourself, it's going to take you too long that the pie is not going to be worth anything. Okay, that's the second thing. 3, stop thinking about just a specific market. You're probably thinking just about Lebanon, you're localizing your mind and thinking about the problems that you're seeing. But generally, think about something that's global and big. So these are the 3 most important things, I think.
That's big ones. So thanks for that. Well, thanks a lot, Abdo. I think a lot of entrepreneurs learned a lot of things today, so thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you for
if
having
they
us.
want to reach you, you're at SowLution. We're going to put the link to the company in the profile.